We are in Carson City, Nevada. We will call the meeting to order. First item, public comment. Do we have public comment in Carson City? Oh, roll call.
Chair Rob, we're live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you. Will you please call roll?
Good morning, everyone. To start roll call, Chair Rob,
I can't hear her.
She just called me.
Oh, she called in?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
She called your name. Called your name. She's roll calling.
Oh, oh, bye. You can see my struggle sometimes. I got my ears up. Some voices I don't hear very well.
can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
And Jess.
Okay, so Chair Rob,
Here,
Michelle Kelly,
Here.
Betsy Aiello,
Here.
Jim Barnes,
Here.
April Karen,
Here.
Leslie Biddleston,
Here.
Jennifer McClendon,
Here.
Betsy Strasburg,
Here.
Janelle Woodward,
Here.
and Stacy Weeks.
Here.
Thank you, everyone. We have a quorum.
okay, thank you. Sorry for the confusion during that agenda item. Now we can move on to public comment.
Thank you and good morning. Chair Rob, fellow board members, my name for the record is Terry Laird. I'm the Executive Director at RPEN, the Retired Public Employees of Nevada, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with over 7,000 dues-paying members in 17 chapters statewide. We thank this board and staff for the efforts made during the recent legislative session to try to lower costs for state employees in PEB, especially those who aren't making the huge salaries, who, as witnessed by so many letters of public comment posted on record for this meeting, are struggling to cover their escalating healthcare costs. We're also grateful that life insurance rates were returned to pre-COVID levels, but it's still concerning that long-term disability was not addressed, and we're hopeful that that can be brought back at some point, if not during the interim, then at the next session in 2025, especially if gaming revenue continues to hit record highs. We also wish interim executive officer Celestina Glover good luck in her effort to become the next executive officer. And we thank her for her willingness to continue working with the Public Employee Coalition as it relates to going over PEB matters with us pre-meetings. We believe all of us need to work together to get information out to all PEB participants, not just actives, but the thousands of retirees in the Medicare exchange. It still concerns us that all transmissions from PEB is done via email, since we are aware that many retirees do not use email and don't even have internet access for one reason or another. For that reason, we still hope Ms. Glover will continue the tradition of providing RPEN a PEB update called Health Matters that we offer our members through our members-only newsletter, the RPEN Review. It's mailed out to every one of our more than 7,000 members 6 times per year, and it puts important PEB information directly into those folks' hands that may not have access to it otherwise. I know our members have appreciated receiving that information, so we hope our joint venture can continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you have that, you give that to staff so that you can
Sure.
put that into the record.
Who should I give it
Appreciate that. Okay, further public comment.
Good morning, Chair Rob, Vice Chair Kelly, members, Interim Executive Officer Glover, Kent Urban, ERVIN, representing the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the statewide association of faculty at Nevada's public colleges and universities. I would like to endorse the comments of Ms. Laird and comment on a couple of agenda items. The budget reports indicates excess reserves are now near zero. The projected amount was 33 million as of the end of April PEB budget closing. So why has it evaporated to zero? To plan for the future, the board needs to know whether this was due to higher usage, higher medical charges, catastrophic cases, or other factors. Is a particular plan most responsible? Have the partial restoration of benefits approved by the legislature already been incorporated in the FY 2024 budget? And are they covered within the beginning balance? We hope these questions will be answered today. Regarding plan design for the second year of the biennium, the primary focus needs to be maintaining the benefits as approved by the legislature in the budget. NFA has advocated in the past for reducing the employee premium for the employee-only tier of the least expensive plan to zero, but never at the expense of dependents. 100% coverage for the single employee is in the state's interest for recruitment and retention. Options for getting there in the future should be explored, but certainly not by increasing premiums for dependents. Also in plan design, the differentiation between the three plans need to be fine-tuned. The HMO EPO plan should be restored to a zero deductible and no co-insurance plan, as most people expect for an HMO plan. Participants pay extra for that plan in order to have predictable co-pays. And so moving to a deductible plan there doesn't satisfy that need, also the co-insurance. The low deductible plan was changed to a zero deductible plan, and we are not sure why. A reasonable low deductible of a few $100s could be offset by improvements in co-pays or co-insurance, or by adjusting premiums downward, and again, to differentiate the three plans so that participants have clear choices that they are now paying for when they choose one of the higher plans. Finally, the IRS minimum deductible for the high deductible plan is kicking in, raising the deductible from $1,500 to $1,600 for single employees, and that will continue to go up in the future due to inflation adjustments at IRS. That's a savings to the plan and a cost to participants, so it should be offset by an increased HSA contribution, for example, or other enhancements. So thank you for this opportunity to provide input today.
Thank you. Any further public comment in Carson City? Seeing none?
Yes, sir. Well, we have two online. I'll get the public slide up right now.
Okay, thank you.
For those who have joined for public comment, your name or last four digits of your phone number will be announced, and you'll be advised you have been unmuted. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record, and then proceed with your comments. As a reminder for those on the phone, please press *6 to unmute. Due to time considerations, each caller will be limited to 3 minutes. Douglas Unger, you have permission to speak. Slowly spell and state your name for the record.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G-U-N-G-E-R, President, UNLV Chapter, Nevada Faculty Alliance, and Chair, Government Affairs Committee. Thank you, Director Robb and the PEB Board for your service and consideration. First, we would like to thank the executive leadership of UMR for their outreach to set a meeting in late August with UNLV and NFA representatives after public comment in July. We believe our conversation is leading to improvements in communications between PEB members and UMR, plus increased support services, which are most welcome. We are continuing to work toward further improvements also through our own efforts to educate our PEB members about how better to address billing and provider issues. Thanks to UMR for this constructive response. Regarding today's agenda, we hope PEB leadership and the PEB board will be able to leave plan benefits as intact and stable as possible for the next fiscal year. We note many public comments from state employees requesting a plan adjustment for 0% premiums for the covered employee. Informal consultations with our UNLV colleagues indicate that we also support this change, but only if funds can be found to continue to subsidize dependent insurance costs at current levels. Without the current dependent subsidies, we believe state employees with children and partners will be forced to shoulder much higher costs, which could be too burdensome. Finally, we wish to offer our warmest wishes to Interim Executive Officer Celestina Glover and to her application for the permanent position. She is very experienced, knows PEB inside and out, and we look forward to working with her in the coming year, including regular PEB advocacy group check-ins and meetings that vastly improve member communications. Thank you all once again for your service and for your thoughtful work on the PEB board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Unger. Public comment.
Caller with the last four digits, 7912. Please press *6 to unmute, and please slowly state and spell your name for the record. Caller with the last four, 7912. You have permission to speak if you wish to make public comment.
Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment and we'll move on to agenda item number 3. PEB board disclosure for applicable board meeting agenda items, Attorney General's office.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chair Rob. This is Radhika Connell, Deputy Attorney General for the record. This agenda item is to allow me to make a disclosure regarding conflicts of interest on behalf of the board members who are eligible for PEB benefits. Pursuant to NRS 281A.420, on behalf of the board members who are eligible for PEB benefits or whose families are eligible for PEB benefits, I offer this disclosure that they will be voting on those items that may affect the benefits. That may affect the benefits available to them or their family members. The law does not require abstention from voting merely because the board member or their family member is eligible for PEB benefits. At this time, I invite any member of the board who has any additional disclosure to make it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will close agenda item number 3 and move on to agenda item number 4. Discussion regarding recruitment process for new permanent executive officer of PEB. Recruitment open through October or September 28th. I've asked Division Administrator of DHRM, Mandy Bowsmith, to be in attendance today. Will you please come and explain the recruitment process that we went through and what we found through the recruitment process, how long the recruitment was open, and how many channels we tried to get that recruitment through.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Rob. For the record, my name is Mandy Bowsmith. I serve the state of Nevada as the administrator for the Division of Human Resource Management within the Department of Administration. When former executive officer Laura Rich departed the state, we undertook entering into a contract with Ms. Glover to come in as the interim executive officer to continue operations for the program. In conjunction with that, Chair Rob and I conferred and made a decision to open a recruitment for the executive officer. We did so through the DHRM classification recruitment group, and they opened the recruitment statewide. Then once we were not getting the candidate pool that we thought we wanted, we opened it nationwide. So we sent it out nationwide. It was open for a period of 6 weeks all told. There were 4 candidates that applied, 3 of whom were deemed ineligible under the minimum qualifications that are spelled out in the statutory requirement for qualifications.
I'm going to ask you a few more follow-up questions. This isn't the only high-level position we currently have open within the state. And one that I'm very familiar with, we're looking for project coordinator, project manager for OPM for the new Core NV project. And I know we've interviewed 5 or 6 times for that. We've done interviews, selected candidates, and tried to move forward on that recruitment. And every time we have not been able to we've made offers and not been able to land a successful candidate due to Northern Nevada's pay scale compared to cost of living. The candidates that we have selected in those other roles have asked if they could do it remotely. And on projects such as that project or in positions such as this one, remote option is not something we're going to explore in those type of scenarios. So the recruitment process for other high-level positions, I know throughout the state, have been hindered by that, especially looking outside the state. And as Ms. Goldsmith spoke to, the qualifications NRS are stringent to make sure we get the right person into this position. So with those qualifications, there may be other people that can do the job, but because of the qualifications, they do not qualify. So we have one candidate. And I don't want anybody to ever think that we're settling because we have one candidate. In my mind, we have a very qualified candidate. We're lucky that that person has taken an interim role after retirement and is willing to come back. So we can get into further discussion about that in additional agenda items we have here today. I've made my comments. Does anybody have any questions or comments of Ms. Goldsmith at this time while we have her? Because this is an important day for Ms. Goldsmith. She has not a job fair. She has a hiring fair currently going on in Carson City. With our vacancy rate being in excess of 20%. We are doing hiring fairs, not job fairs. You come in, we have agencies ready to offer jobs on the spot today. And so Ms. Goldsmith took time out of her day to be here instead of it something that we really need. Does anybody else have any questions of Ms. Goldsmith? Why do we have?
I just have a timeline question just to follow up. Michelle Kelly for the record. So you said that the recruitment was open statewide first and then nationwide after there were not suitable applicants. At what period of time did that take? Was it 2 weeks open statewide and then full nationwide, or what was the split there?
For the record, Mandy Bowsmith, DHRM administrator. Actually, we ended up doing 3 and 3. It ended up being 21 days open statewide and then 21 additional days open on a nationwide platform.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Ms. Goldsmith while we have? Seeing none, I thank you. Good luck today.
Thank you. If I may give a shameless plug for those of you who know people who would like to work for the state of Nevada, we are holding a hiring fair at the Nevada State Library and Archives building, which is at 100 North Stewart. It's in the lobby. It is a hiring fair. So we are planning to put on the table offers for employment or contingent offers if there are certain restrictions that need to happen, like background checks. This is the first of 6 we will be running in Northern Nevada. And then on November 2nd and 3rd, we will be running 2 fairs in Las Vegas at the new McCarran campus. We're very excited about. So please tell family, friends who want to work. We want them to work. Thank you all very much.
Can I ask a follow-up? I just wanted to know, are you hiring for all levels of jobs? Or
Yes.
is this entry? So
Yes.
anything available?
Yes.
Potentially is on the table.
Yes, it's Mandy Bowsmith for the record, DHRM administrator. So we were fortunate to be able to work with the governor's office to get Executive Order 2023-10 issued, which helps us greatly. We are waiving minimum qualifications for grades 29 and below. These are all of our entry-level clerical, entry-level technical positions. And we are also eliminating selective criteria for recruitments because we find that people are screening people out, not screening people in with those selective criteria. And then we are also allowing for grades 29 below auto progressions to occur faster than the job classification says. So as a good example, and this is actually how it came to our attention, the DMV Services Technician series starts at a level 23. You have to sit in a level 1 for 12 months before you can auto progress to a level 2. That's 12 months at a grade 23, which is not very much money at all, which is probably of note to this group, considering we're talking about health insurance premiums and how much premiums cost for employees and for dependents. At a grade 23, folks aren't affording those things. And so they typically will come in at a grade 23 in a DMV Services Technician 1 and then find another opportunity as an administrative assistant at a higher grade somewhere else. And so in order for the DMV to retain talent and to be able to hopefully bring in more talent, that auto progression allows the department to make a determination about when an employee is ready to progress to the next level. So that employee might be ready within 3 months at the level 1 to go to a level 2. This will progress them through the series from a 23 to a 25 to a 27 to a 29 much more quickly than otherwise they would have been able to do. And hopefully they can retain some folks, not lose folks to other agencies, but also be able to keep some talent that also can progress up through the professional series within DMV at some point. So we are really, really hoping that we get folks coming in who want to work. It is for all levels of jobs. Right now, we're focusing on classified jobs because that's where we have the most vacancy. We do have vacancies in our unclassified, but it's sort of difficult to throw an unclassified hiring fair because it's very, the jobs are so broad, you know. But our model today is we are bringing people in, we are scanning and reviewing resumes on the spot. We're putting them through sort of a speed dating kind of interview process. And then we're hoping to get offers on the table and get people in seats.
Right, that is, and just a follow-up, is there information about the Reno and the Las Vegas ones on your website? So we can.
Yes, at hr.nv.gov. There's a flyer that's posted. There's also a memorandum that has all of the dates. And you will be seeing more statewide correspondence, and hopefully we're going to get a little media attention to help us out with some marketing. So yes,
Thank you.
thank you for the questions.
This is our first one. We're kind of kicking the tires today, finding the weak spots that we need to improve upon before we go real big, but we're going to go big.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you for sharing. We'll publicize where we can.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you for being here. Okay, we'll close the agenda. Any other questions on that before we leave this agenda? I know we're done with Ms. Goldsmith, but any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 5. Applicant interview for position of executive officer of PEB. Informational discussion. Applicant interview to be interviewed in approximately 1 hour. I don't know if it's going to take that. Celestina Glover. I will start with questions, and then we don't have any formal questions put together, but can you give us a brief background on your state service along with your prior, what you've done in your careers prior to state service?
Celestina Glover for the record, the current interim executive officer for PEB. So my history, I started out in the Air Force. I joined the Air Force when I was 18, like a lot of other people. I spent 14 and a half years in the communications and computer field. I then transferred to the Air National Guard in California, and I continued my career there until retirement in, I won't say wait, I retired. It's been a long time. During that time there, I became the first sergeant, which put me essentially in charge of all the enlisted folks within the unit. We were 200 strong, and I was the senior manager. My primary goal and responsibility was really health and welfare for our individuals, also disciplinary actions, a very similar role to HR. I came to the state of Nevada in 1995, where I worked for Department of Corrections I actually started as a clerical trainee. The way they were able to hire back then, I came in as a clerical trainee on day 1. On day 2, I was a grade 21. On day 3, I was a grade 23. And I became back then management assistant. I progressed up through my career where eventually I went to CIS, which was our workers' comp agency. At the time, it was a state agency. It later privatized. I became a workers' comp specialist. I worked on the financial side of the house, and our primary goal was collecting premium from employers and sending them to collections when they didn't pay, and recommending actions to our investigative unit or enforcement unit if they didn't stay current on the workers' comp premium, which in some cases resulted in business doors being shut until they complied with the requirements. Once I left there, I actually went to, at the time, it was Department of Personnel. I was a personnel analyst for a short period of time, and then determined that the best fit for me was the financial side of the world. So I moved on and became an auditor at EHHS. At the time, they were called Human Resources. And then went on to DMV as a management analyst and continued to progress from there. Became an administrative services officer, went to Medicaid, worked there in the accounting unit, went to the budget office shortly after that. And then eventually I came to PEB in 2012, where I finished out my career. I was the chief financial officer from August of 2012 until I retired in February of 2019. And I came back on May 1st of this year. Here I am.
No, follow-up. What are your goals and vision of PEB and your role going forward if you're successful in getting it done?
So what I'm looking at, I know that a lot of times the answer is I want to make innovative changes and things like that. But really what I would like to see, I think we have a good group. We're always short staffed like the rest of the state. But what I'm looking to do is work with my team to really do a deep dive on what our benefits look like. What works, what doesn't work, what's being used, what's not being used, and then make recommendation to the board on where we should move the plan. We know that oftentimes we hear of good programs, we try to implement them, and we get so many things going, we never really get a chance to look at them and go, is this really a good idea? It sounded good at the time, but a year down the road or 2 years down the road, was that really ideal? We have several programs that are coming online this year. Some have already started, some are going to be on as probably by January. And rather than continuing to add programs, we would like to look at it as, let's kind of stay at this level, review it, and really understand what works for the program, what works for our members, what do they really need? Is this a program or a benefit that we're offering that really isn't serving our members? And what do we need to do? What do they need instead? Does it mean eliminating some things? Possibly. Does it mean adding things? Possibly. We really need to take that time to fully understand and get to a point where we can administer the plan in a way that provides good information to everyone that's enrolled in our plan, and also take the appropriate steps to make any adjustments, course changes, things of that nature.
We've had some audits that haven't come back as to our satisfaction. How do you see us moving through that process and ensuring progress in the future and making sure that people we serve are taken care of in a proper manner? And how do we move forward through some of the hurdles we've recently experienced?
So I think that one of the things to look like, we always talk about communication, and I think right now that we try to use all the different levels of communication: email, newsletter, mailings, meetings. I know our goal is to try to educate our members as much as possible to get the information out there. That also means working with all our advocacy groups. So it could be RPEN, it could be AFSCME, NG, all the different groups that are definitely stakeholders. They have a stake. How do we make that communication useful is always a struggle. We get to a point where we're trying to provide so much information that it becomes information overload, and people start treating our mailings and our emails as spam, and they just ignore them. And we know that a portion of people don't realize what's going on because they just don't read what we send them. If we could go out to every household and hand them something and read it to them, great. I would need about 3,000 people, please. we will do the best we can. I think more, whether it's through a webinar, virtual meeting, or in-person meetings, to maybe try to reach out to more employees locally and in other areas, as well as talking to retirees, talking to even their family members. Because oftentimes it's not the employee, it's the spouse that's actually making that decisions. And we need to maybe incorporate them more in the discussions when it comes to education about our plans.
Okay. Any other board member have any questions or comments?
Thank you. Janelle Woodward for the record. You mentioned that part of what you did with the guard was health and welfare of your guard members. So I guess my question is directed at where's your heart at? Kind of. We all are very aware of cost, high cost of healthcare, limits on what we can do. But I guess I'm wondering, what is your feeling? Are you only the bean counter? Are you truly caring about the health and welfare of state employees with this, yes, it's a benefit, but it's a very important benefit. It's actually one I'm very passionate about. And I know if I am, other state employees are as well. So I'm just wondering what your feeling is. That are you focused on cost only, or are you looking at the full picture?
Celestina Glover for the record. I'm looking at the whole picture. I am a bean counter. That's what I did. But I also look at part of the reason I came to PEB was I knew I could work in the financial side, but because of our small agency, it afforded me the ability to look also at the program side, which in a lot of agencies in the bigger ones, you kind of get, you just get stuck in one place and you don't really see what your decisions are doing and how it affects other areas. And so working here, it's allowed me to kind of look at both sides, be more involved on both sides. And I think it's important that we have the best plan we can put together within the resources we have. And the resources are financial as well as the people I have here that can help administer that plan. So my heart's in both places. I need to consider both things. I can't consider them in silos. If the world was perfect and I could have anything I want, we would have a plan that had everything that anybody could want. But when I flip to the other side and realize that that's not practical, then I have to go, okay, what's most important? What is needed? What are we hearing from everyone? Where are weak points? Where are strong points? And address the weak points without sacrificing the strong points. So it's both sides. It can't be one without the other.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may.
Yes, please.
Would you consider doing maybe a little bit more outreach to all state employees? Hasn't always been hugely successful in the past getting responses in that, but finding ways to get feedback on maybe decisions that would be made by the employees.
Celestina Glover for the record. I am always open to reaching out to the employees, employees and retirees both. Like I said earlier, we need to hear what they have to say, listen to what they're saying. But I think we also need to maybe include some of those family members, like I said, who are likely making the decisions for the families. So it is hard to get their feedback. We know that a lot of our folks, they enroll in a plan, they stay in that plan forever. They never make changes. They don't think about it. It's just there if they need it. And for other people, they're definitely more invested in trying to determine what's best for them and their families. And we need to look at, how do we go forward and how do we understand versus we know what's sitting over here. We know what we're working with, but is that working for everybody else? So without that feedback, we really don't know. We're guessing. I mean, keep in mind, the PEB employees are members also, so we can get their feedback. But they work here and they understand a little better how the plans work, where, you know, the DMV tech maybe doesn't. The correctional officer maybe isn't paying attention. The retiree, they're traveling and they're just, as long as they're covered, they're good. So those folks, we don't hear a lot from. So we can try to get their feedback, and that's really all we can do is try. We'll see if there's other avenues that we haven't explored in the past, and then try to go down that path. What those are right now, I don't know, because what I've seen our group do is try to reach out every way possible. We used to do a lot more in-person meetings, and over the years that has kind of gone by the wayside toward more virtual. And as Ms. Laird said, there are a lot of people that don't have the internet for one reason or another. They don't read emails. They, you know, they want a hard copy in their hands that they can read. So how we get to those folks beside mailings, and are they reading it and are they understanding it? That's where our challenge is. Thank you.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Michelle Kelly for the record. Ms. Glover, so I guess I heard your focus on education and communication. That's fantastic. As well as doing that deep dive on the current benefits. I think that those are really prudent things to do. I guess my question though comes into staffing, because your executive staff are limited. And I know the decision was made during the legislative session before you came on board, of course, to get rid of the education communication officer in place of a lawyer. So I'm just wondering, how do you do? That's not right?
No.
Okay.
Okay, I've got to, I know where Nick is at, but this is an interview with Ms. Glover, so let's keep it with Ms. Glover, and then we'll get through this.
Okay, so my question is really, how do you, I know that during open enrollment, everything was on just online, but how do you adequately build communication, the strategy, and then the multidisciplinary way of communicating with people if you don't have that high level professional?
Celestina Glover for the record. The position that we eliminated was the chief information officer. It was our IT person. We felt like because we had support through, at the time, it was each state IT. I think that the thought was we needed the benefit of an in-house legal counsel to help us with compliance and other things that come up that we really could use the assistance full-time of a legal mind. We use the DAG, obviously, and we will continue to use their office for things that we need outside of personal staff. Our education and communication officer did not go away. That person is still a member of the staff. And so I will work with her to see where she needs some assistance. What are we lacking? Does she have some other ideas that maybe we haven't implemented or considered? And then we'll see what is feasible.
Sure.
So that position used to be part of the executive staff. Maybe that's my confusion. Who is in that position at the moment?
So Celestina Glover for the record. In the past, we had a PIO, Public Information Officer. They actually weren't part of the executive staff. They actually worked for the operations officer. That position over time has become the Education and Communication Officer. And that's Tara, who is, she does all our newsletters. She does all the communication that goes outside of PEP. So, it wasn't a change from moving them from an executive officer. It was essentially a change in title and a little bit change in duties to try to get the education piece, not just the information piece.
Thank you. And so you feel you're adequately staffed to kind of really dig into the education piece and start, doing different communications and targeted and all of that good stuff.
This is Celestina Glover. I won't say we're adequately staffed. Could we use more people to assist? Of course we can. But that is going to leave it up for me and the rest of the executive team. We all play dual duty. Just because we have a chief financial officer does not mean that I can't involve that individual on the education side. She may have ideas that we hadn't considered. Same thing with our QC officer, same thing with the operations officer. I will use the team, all of my staff to the best of our ability to try to get that information out there and see what we're lacking and where we can improve and what can we do to make that better.
Please.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie Middleston, for the record. This question is kind of a stability question. You have quite an extensive background. I'm also a veteran, so I understand what the first sergeant's role is. So you've retired from 2 careers. So my question is, how long do you think you would like to stay in this position? Knowing that, PEB is very complicated and really needs some stability. So my question is, how long do you see yourself, if you are appointed, staying in this role?
Celestina Glover, for the record. My plan, whether it happens or not, is to stay at least for the next 2 to 3 years, get us through session, we've got budget building coming up. We've got a session we're getting ready to prepare for. We've got plan design, we're doing rate setting. Like there's a lot of things happening in the next 6 to 12 months that I'm gearing up for. I will not leave 6 months from now. That is not the plan, unless you guys all tell me. The plan is to stay and get us through, at the very least, get us through that next session. So going into plan year 26 and 27. So that is what I'm looking at currently. That could be extended depending on, the satisfaction of the board with my performance. And I'm going crazy coming back from retirement. So yeah, I'm not looking at going anywhere very quickly.
All right, thank you.
Pepsi Strasburg for the record. Ms. Glover, thank you for all that you've done over the last 6 months. We really appreciate and your desire to continue to serve. Over your career at the state, which is quite extensive here, not all things go right. Can you kind of talk about a situation or a project where things didn't go right? How did you recover from that? And what lessons learned that you'd like to practice in the future?
On memory banks. Celestina Glover. Off the top of my head, I don't have a particular situation. There's always something that doesn't always go to plan. Whether it's your, bringing online a whole new system, which when I worked at DMV, they had just gone through a system change. During my time there, they actually had a break-in at an office where a camera was stolen, and the camera was actually a computer, and it had commercial driver's license records on it. I was a business manager. I was not a DMV technician, had no clue about that side of the house, but I got rolled in with a lot of other people to assist with, one, notifying all the individuals that were affected by this, going into the system, learning it really quickly on reviewing the records, who was affected, who didn't respond, and then reissuing all new driver's licenses to those individuals. We managed it. I think it was about 5,000 records. The director at the time pulled in every resource she could. So a lot of us were doing things that were way out of our comfort zone and our knowledge base. but we managed to get those records. They also recovered the camera and found the person who actually stole it. So we at least got that much back, and then additional notifications went out and provided for people to be able to go to the credit rating agencies to verify that there were no unusual transactions happening on the credit, so in credit cards or in any other financial situations. So yeah, that was.
So learning on the fly.
Learning on the fly.
Thank you.
Board Member Weeks.
Stacey Weeks for the record. What do you think the biggest challenge is facing PEB in meeting its mission over the next couple of years? And what would you do to lead the team and the board in the right direction to address that challenge?
So the challenge, I think the immediate challenge, it was mentioned in public comment, it's also in our board packet. Since I first started with PEB, we've had a pretty significant excess reserves, and we've been using those, also called differential cash. We've been using those to fund benefit enhancements. Those reserves have finally gone to a point where we've exhausted them. We right now do not have any excess reserves. So the biggest challenge, I think, will be how do we enhance benefits, make the plan the best it can be, realizing that the funding has to come from within resources we have. That is part of the deep dive. What can we do? What adjustments can we make? And then once we get that deep dive, and I'm not talking about something that we're going to do for the plan year coming up on July 1st. I'm talking about something that might be in plan year 26 or 27, where we actually have time to truly look at what does this program look like and what should it look like to meet the needs of our participants and our members. And I think the way for me to do that is periodic feedback to the board to let you know what we're finding and to take whatever action the board wants us to take at that point. So it's really keeping you informed as to what we're discovering. Maybe we discover that the plan is the way it should be, and it is meeting the needs of most people. But generally, there's always something we can improve on. So that will be my focus, and that's what I will try to do going forward.
Board Member Ayala.
Betsy Aiello for the record, and I really commend you about the deep dive, because so many times things get added that sound fantastic, but certain things can conflict with each other. So I really do that. One of the biggest things I've seen since I've been in this last year, I'd say I've been here for years, has been we did have extra money at the legislature, but from my understanding, not all of it was accepted because of the timing of how things can come back and whether we can actually take everything because of how PEB's budget building, PEB's benefit building, all of the timing. And so my question to you would be, someone comes and says, the legislature comes, not someone, the legislature comes and says, we have money for you guys. We want to make you whole. We want to be able to offer, because we can't hire anybody, what we used to offer. Can you make it happen? And then to hear, no, we can't make it happen. That's, I don't know if you have thoughts or processes or.
Celestina Glover for the record. Just recently had this discussion. The timing of setting rates and open enrollment in the plan start conflicts with the legislative session in the odd years. Because we're talking about a session that's not going to finish till the first week in June. Open enrollment is already done. Rates have already been set for the upcoming plan. My suggestion or recommendation would be to a legislator that rather than trying to get that into the first year, look at our second year and beyond. Instead of trying to rush things in, if we're doing the deep dive and we're really understanding what we need, then ideally we'd have that information before we go into session. And that would be in the first year. But if they somehow found a pot of money that would help us with benefits, then I would suggest do that in the second year of the plan, because that gives us time, it gives us a runway to get the information out there, to get the rate set accordingly, to get the funding the way we need it. So it would be nice to implement everything tomorrow, but sometimes you have to wait a month.
As a follow-up, this is Betsy Aiello again. And this might not be a fair question for you, because you weren't as involved at that point, but is there a reason that you understand why we didn't do that then?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. I don't know why that's not been done in the past. I know there's always been typically because most of the budgetary side, they want to implement for the beginning of the fiscal year, which is July 1st. But oftentimes, even outside of a plan, even for other programs, that's not always ideal. And what I see go back, especially to IFC or any interim committee, is why didn't you implement this thing we gave you the money for? Well, we needed 6, 9, 12 months to actually get this thing implemented. So your first year, a lot of times, is doing the study to see what you need to do, especially if it's something you weren't actually planning for. So if the process was more of a take that first year, the first year of the biennium, figure out how you're going to implement the new program with the new funding, and then implement it in the second year, I think that's more feasible. That could work for PEB, that could work for other programs. I wasn't in a position where I could make those suggestions. I don't know if it was thought about at the time. You know, I can't speak for other people, but that's the way I would approach it. Whether or not that would be satisfactory to the legislature, I can't answer that at this point.
And then one final thing, one of the things that I thought I've understood why we haven't done that, because I've heard this word a lot, but for any program to grow, this would be the problem. One-time funding. But my understanding is once it's in the program, then it should probably become some of the base, but if it takes too long, I don't know. So, and so that's my thought, is how that would impact that also.
Celestina Glover for the record. So one-time funding is an issue. It doesn't work for a plan unless it's a benefit that you really can say, oh, this is a finite thing that can only happen for this period. What we would have to look at is, as we are going to future sessions, that we would say, okay, we received this one-time funding. The funding provided a benefit that was, it was successful, it's used, it's needed, and we would have to justify to get funding in future years. I can't tell you what the legislature will do. And of course, if the economy takes a nosedive, then, you know, in the past, it's been benefits and compensation that typically takes the hit. So whether it's frozen or furloughs or whatever. So all we can do is justify an ask and hope they say yes.
Jim Barnes for the record. I just wondered if you could tell us a little more about your philosophy on the development of staff.
So Celestina Glover for the record. Through my career, through the time I worked for the state, I have always encouraged staff to look at what other opportunities are. What kind of education and training do they need, whether it's going back to school, is it a technical school, is it a certification program, and then try to support them in that effort. I am also a big proponent for reaching out to other agencies, the individual applying for those positions in other agencies, especially when you're looking at PET. We're very small, and so there's very limited opportunity for career growth. So if you're looking to move into certain positions, it might require that you leave one agency, work somewhere else for several years, develop your skills. And then when those positions come back open in the agency you left, come back. Try to get those opportunities that way. Movement within an agency, if there's promotional opportunities, then definitely we want those individuals, because we already have a knowledge base. We already have people that are qualified that deserve those promotions. They've earned them through hard work and through taking their own time to learn how our program works. And I think that's true in any state agency or any company for that matter. I would never say pigeonhole somebody into one place. I also say that there are some individuals that they come into a position, it doesn't matter where it's at, a grade 23 or a grade 33. They do good work in that position. They're happy in that position. They stay long-term. They're your history. They're your knowledge. They train all your new people. You need those folks too. There are a lot of people that their career move is not their thing. And so I want to support those folks too. Nothing wrong with deciding this is the right place for you and you should continue for however long that is. So I would support both options.
Thank you.
I've got a follow-up from, I think, kind of the trend on talking about legislative session and how all that works. Kind of fixates us. But I'm just wondering, your position reports to the board, but then it obviously has a very long dotted line up to the budget office in the governor's office. And obviously we all work at the pleasure of. So I'm just wondering, how are you going to manage that kind of dual reporting when it comes to, you know, the board recommending certain activities and then the budget office second guessing the board? How are you going to manage that level of stress, for one thing, but also navigate the choppy waters?
Celestina Glover for the record. So previously as a CFO, that was something I had to do anyway. I supported what the executive officer was trying to do, who was trying to support what the board was trying to do. So when I presented our request to the budget office, budget office, now GFO, then, you know, that goes through the governor's office, obviously, explaining, trying to get them to understand why we're going the path we're going. Can you always get them to agree? Not necessarily. As the executive officer, I see my role in a similar way, in that I would still need to make the argument why we're trying to go a certain way. I would obviously be supporting the board and trying to take their vision forward and doing my best to explain to the governor's finance office, the governor's office, and then eventually the legislature, why we need what we've requested, why we're making plan changes. All of those things we would have discussed internally and we would have brought to the board. So trying to make sure that I clearly communicate to those individuals that will make the final decisions. That's going to be the goal, and hopefully I'll be successful at that. I think sometimes if you can have some conversations with them and get their understanding, a lot of times that's all you need, because I find that oftentimes when you listen to the comments that are made or the questions that are asked, it becomes obvious that they, for whatever reason, didn't fully understand what you're trying to do. And that a lot of times it's because we didn't make it very clear. So I will do my best to try to make it clear to whoever I need to talk to, what it is we're trying to do, where we're headed, and why we're headed in that direction.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll close agenda item number 5 and we'll move on to agenda item number 6. Discussion and possible action regarding appointment of the executive officer of PEB, subject to governor approval for NRS 287.0424, section 1.
This is, that's for the record, this is Betsy Aiello, and I would like to say that I read some of your written answers too, and I was impressed with the quality of the answers, even down to grammar and English and formatting your answer and how I mean, I hate to say this, but over the years, I've read some things that really surprised me at different levels of candidates, and so, and I'm also very impressed, and over the years, I know we've known each other, but with your background with PEB and your knowledge with how to work within the politics of working in the government, it's very different than being an executive in private industry also, and how to balance different things. So I just wanted to make that statement that throughout the answers you've given, and you seem well aware of the challenges and what needs to occur to move forward. You have some thoughts and plans. And so I just wanted to speak and support from that standpoint.
I'm gonna make one thing clear. We only have one candidate today, and I don't want to feel like we're settling to get paid with that.
Excuse me, Chairman, this is the court reporter. Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay, speak up. Okay, thank you. I don't want it to seem like we're settling because we only have one candidate. I consider us very lucky today that Ms. Glover would come out of retirement to even consider this job. She's retired. She was happily retired. I think it's a great favor to the state of Nevada and to the participants in this program that somebody of her caliber would even consider coming out of retirement to do this. It truly is remarkable that we can have somebody with 7 years of experience. She was in her role from 2012 to 2019, has tremendous experience, knows the ins and outs. In one of my first meetings I had in my new role, I met with the former executive officer, and the amount of information she went over in one meeting with me, I looked at her and said, "Why are you here? You're worth so much more on the outside in private industry." And I probably shouldn't ask that question if she left for private industry. But that's the truth. Somebody with the skills and knowledge level of Ms. Glover and her predecessor, we're lucky to have those individuals. And I truly believe that having Ms. Glover here will further other employees within the agency, their knowledge base, and help build that bridge into the future. I think it's a crucial step for us to have that bridge, to gain the knowledge of other employees, to get them to the level that they're comfortable in taking on such a role. And I know there's multiple people that we could foster and move towards that direction, but if they felt they were ready, they would raise their hand now, and they haven't. So I truly appreciate Ms. Glover and where she's at, and her willingness to come back and support the state of Nevada and the employees of the state of Nevada.
And with that, no better way to follow on than Michelle Kelly for the record. I'll make a recommendation that we offer Ms. Celestina Glover the continuing role of PEBP Executive Officer. And thank you for your application.
We have a motion.
For the record, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor.
Sorry, who was the second?
April Karn?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Congratulations.
Yay.
Okay, we'll close agenda item number 6 and move on to agenda item number 7, consent agenda. All items for possible action, consent items will be considered together and acted on as one motion unless removed for consideration separately by a board member. Everybody has their packet. Does anybody want to remove one of the items on the consent agenda? Board Member Kelly?
Could I ask that 7.2.1, the budget report, be removed from the consent agenda?
Okay. Any other items to be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll call for the motion, removing 7.2.1.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, let's.
Excuse me, can I get the name of the second again?
Betsy Strasburg.
Thank you.
Okay, 7.2.1.
Yes, so Michelle Kelly for the record. So I really just have a quick question and it's a follow-up from public comment. Can you address the zero reserves again? In light of all of the enhancements we did using reserves, that we're only kind of partway through, we've just started the new biennium. So can you talk about where are those programs, where is the money for those sitting now if we're at zero reserves, or do we have no money for those anymore?
Well, to begin with, we did have an increase in expected claims.
Excuse me, can you please state your name?
Michelle Whalen for the record, sorry. We had to do a work program at the very end of fiscal year 23 for approximately $9 million to cover a shortfall in claims category 40 for state active and state retirees.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. I don't know if you're speaking close to a microphone, but I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. This little shout at the ceiling. So anyway, we did a $9 million work program at the end of fiscal year 23 to cover a shortfall in claims for category 40, which reduced our excess reserves by that. And then when we balanced forward the cash, we had to cover another $14 million shortfall in what was budgeted for the balance forward. So that took our reserves to zero.
This is Celestine Glover for the record. So I want to clarify that the amount that was projected, that was the budgeted amount, $33 million in our excess reserve. It wasn't projected where we were going to end. During plan year 23, fiscal year 23, we were slowly eating away at the excess reserves. Part of that is because of the shortfall we had in the claims category. We're starting to see that the claims rise and the enhancement to benefits. When we closed the year, we made adjustments based on the memo we received from Siegel, our consultants, for our catastrophic and our incurred but not paid reserves. And that adjusted down. We had 14 million budgeted for excess reserves. The shortfall that we needed to transfer the cash from one year into the next, the shortfall was actually $24 million. So that wiped out the 14 million that we had in excess for the budget. That also was adjusted with the reduction in the other two reserve categories. And then the last $3.5 million or so, we had to reduce the HRA reserve simply because there was nowhere else to go. So we reduced that, still leaving us at a level that we should be fine with those reserve categories. And the plan always had been over the years to utilize excess reserves as much as we could, because there was consternation about the level of reserves that PEB had for a very long period of time. And the reason they had those reserves is because we had a lot of years where we had good experience, good trend. So we ended up saving. But as that changed, and we had kept trying to say, at some point we will exhaust these reserves, we just didn't know when that was going to happen. It took a lot longer than we thought. We started at 90 million back in 2012. Here we are in 2023, and we have finally managed to exhaust all of those reserves. As far as all the benefits that may have been funded with those, we're going to have to monitor it because we're not pulling them out of this year, but we will likely not be able to fund them for plan year 25. And that will be part of what the board will look at when we talk plan design. Where do we go from here?
Thank you.
Yes.
Janelle Woodward for the record. This maybe is an elementary question, but is there a way to show the excess funds and where the movement is and that a little clearer to us as the board? Because sometimes it's really hard to follow where you got, you know, how we went from one number to zero and not, you know, kind of understanding that full, other than, oh, well, everything costs a lot.
This is Celestina Glover for the record. I'll work with Michelle Whalen, the CFO, and we'll see if we can't create maybe a table that kind of shows how we got from here to here, and bring it to the next board meeting.
Great, thanks.
Any further questions?
I just want to clarify what I think I'm hearing then. So that those are gone. We're starting a new budget, or we started a new budget cycle, which is 2 years. So we're going to watch what we're doing with the plan we have in place. And if, like this time, the claims experience is not as favorable, so more claims are coming in that we have to pay, we're going to have to look for next year, because that's when people will choose what plan and how much it costs, and it may go into either increased rate setting or increased costs to the employee or decreased benefits, so that at the end of the biennium, we come out even. And if we're lucky and the claims experience isn't as to the level that it was last year, we may be lucky and be fine. But that's what we're going to have to do. So we need to be aware that even though we're wanting to add back things, is that what I'm hearing?
Celestina Glover for the record. That is correct.
Any further questions? 7.2.1. This is an item on the consent agenda, but I don't believe there needs no action required this week. Okay, let's, is there a motion to approve?
Leslie Biddleston move to approve, item number 7 on the agenda.
6.
Pepsi Strasburg, second.
And motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes unanimous. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, executive officer report. Celestina Glover. It's no longer interim executive officer. We can scratch that out. Informational discussion.
Okay. Celestina Glover for the record. Before you is the executive officer report. We had a couple of things go on this since the last board meeting. We talked about voluntary benefits, specifically to long-term disability. The issue we had where the premiums were calculated incorrectly for those members that have enrolled in that benefit. We recently got word from Core Stream that the standard had agreed to essentially waive, or that's a nice way to say this, eat the $100,000 it was going to cost if they didn't recoup those under collected premiums. So as of the date that we received this, we had not heard back from Division of Insurance, but they did make the notifications. Forestry made the notifications to DOI to explain what they were going to do. They had not taken any action at that point to recoup any of those premiums. So nobody was affected by that. They've also agreed that if somebody did cancel their coverage because they didn't want to pay those back premiums, if those individuals contacted them, they would let them re-enroll. And the notifications are going out. If they haven't gone out already, they'll be going out in the next few days to notify people that back premiums aren't being collected. And so that finally is something which is the direction we wanted them to go. But we're kind of holding powder and waiting, and they kind of saw things our way. Customer service tools. So this came up during public comment and also internal discussion to get somebody in from both UMR and VA benefits as a contact so that can have some face-to-face meetings. We have managed to get those scheduled. We had UMR in the office. Jesse was with us for a couple of days in September to talk to any members who wanted to schedule an appointment. We just recently had Stacy from VIA. She actually did not have anybody contact her during her 2 days in the office. She was here yesterday and the day before. I think on the Medicare exchange, maybe a lot of individuals already, they're used to how their HRA works, and she's the specialist in that area. So, but we will continue to schedule those meetings, and if it looks like they're not being used, then we'll look and see if we need to adjust how often they come in the office. But it is there for those individuals who would like to take advantage of it. And then the call center phone tree, working with QC and our other staff trying to figure out what was going on with the phones. Looks like that, with a lot of call centers, you hit 0 and you get a live person. That doesn't work in our call tree. So we're trying to see if we can. It would hang up on them essentially. It tells them we're not open and hang up and call back during business hours, even though it was business hours. So they're working toward getting that to route them back through the options so that the person can pick the correct option for whatever it is they're trying to address, rather than saying, please call during business hours. And then finally, staffing, like everybody already knows, staffing's been an issue. We did fill a couple of positions in accounting, but as soon as we fill positions, we lose people. They move to other agencies. For whatever reason, they move on. So we're still sitting in that 25% vacancy rate. Now apparently the executive officer position is filled. So we have on the executive team, with this position filled, we now have 100%. That's all the positions are filled. We just need to get staffing in our other areas. The executive officer report, and I will answer any questions you may have.
April Kine for the record, just a quick question going back to the long-term disability. Is there a way for CoreStream to identify perhaps some of those members that terminated their coverage because of this issue and then proactively reach out to them, explaining where we're at with that situation and helping them to perhaps, re-enroll or just help them along the way?
So we did ask that question. This is Celestina Glover for the record. We did ask that question, and they said they didn't have a way of identifying those individuals who may have canceled their coverage because of this issue. Okay. They may have canceled for other reasons. We can certainly go back and see if they could look at the number of people that were affected and maybe, reach out to some of the ones that may have canceled coverage. We don't have a number as to how many they have canceled their coverage, and then try to do some outreach to those folks.
Yeah, thank you. Michelle Kelly for the record. Executive Officer Glover, firstly, I want to thank you and staff. I was particularly outraged by CallStream and the Standard charging these back fees. So I'm very grateful to both the Standard and CallStream for and staff for negotiating this. I think this is a great outcome. So thank you very much. I did have on my list of questions how many people dropped the insurance. So a follow up on that one would be great. And then just a last question on that matter. Will the Commission of Insurance continue to review for future, like to have an answer for future issues that may arise, or have they dropped it since it's null and void now?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. I haven't got word that they dropped their investigation into the issue that happened with this. We can reach back out to them and make sure that we get, a final answer from them as to what they see happen. In the event something of this nature happens again, so that we can use that to address that issue.
Thank you.
Board Member Ayala.
This is a follow-up again on that same question. My belief would be it's a fairly new benefit, and if people enrolled in it, those that dropped it are more likely to be because of this issue than just I had the benefit for a very short period and am tired of it. So my thought would be that if people cancel, so it might be worth them giving the call, just a thought. And then a second thing on the call center phone tree. And I should probably listen, but in your phone tree, is there a way a person can get to a person without pushing 0? Or do you only get queued responses?
Yes, Tim Lindley for the record, quality control. Prior public comment and information complaints we received from members was I'm calling and it's hanging up on me or saying call back during normal business hours. The phone tree, as listed in the report, is designed to direct members to the appropriate people. For example, if someone calls in for an HRA and they're on VIA benefits, there is an option to select that. Or in the example provided, option 3 for voluntary benefits. If they are calling for voluntary benefits, they press that option 3 and it routes them to CallStream in that example. If they want to call and talk to our call center for enrollment and eligibility, they press option 2 and it goes straight to our eligibility queue and it's answered in the order it's received. So if they want to talk to someone directly at PEB, option 2 would be their option. As we've experienced and people have experienced in general, pressing option 0 tends to bypass that.
No,
Yeah.
I was just curious. So within the queue they choose, there should be an option to get to a person
You always get to a person
at
if
some
you
point within.
follow the queue. For example, if you press option, I think 1 or 4 goes to claims processing, and UMR has their own tree in claims processing queues. Yeah. So you will get to a person if you click the appropriate
queue.
Any further questions?
So Betsy Strasberg, I'm kind of new to this process. There were several public comment that had concerns on dental code and vaccination clinic, etc. Will those issues be addressed privately from the PEB organization and reach out to those people, or how does the process work?
So this is Celestina Glover for the record. Typically those inquiries go through QC. So depending on what the inquiry is, what the feedback is, public comment in general, what we hear at the board, we take that in internally, but we don't always, generally it's information given to us. It's not something we typically call everybody and talk to those individuals. So it depends on the situation. But for most part, if there is an issue, they're typically directed to go through our QC or contact, like in this case, maybe it's UMR, maybe it's CallStream, to talk directly to those individuals first. That's their first level. And then if they don't get the satisfaction that they want, then they can appeal it. And that's when we start sending those things into QC. Thank you.
Yes.
Michelle Kelly for the record. So just following up on the vaccine clinics. And I know it's not in your executive report. There was some very strongly worded public comments about something. I'm just wondering if you could add some, provide some information to the board about what actually occurred at these clinics.
Yeah. Off the Dags listening.
This is Celestina Glover. Radhika, are you there?
Yes. Yeah. What's the question again? Can you repeat that,
So
please?
the question is about the vaccine clinics because this information came in on public comment, but it is not in my report or on the agenda.
And someone, are you asking, are you being asked to respond to that?
Yes.
I don't believe you need to. But it's up to you though. If you wish to, or the board requires you to make it, that's fine, but if you're not comfortable, it's or if you're not ready with the response.
Yeah, I
That's
think
my-
we're agendized for discussion on the action report that was put forward, and this is a topic that wasn't included on the action report, so this discussion deliberation outside of the formal action that was put in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on agenda item number 8? Okay, agenda item number 9, discussion for possible direction from the board to staff for potential program design changes for plan year 2025, July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. For which board request additional information and cost to be presented for the November 16th, 2023 meeting.
Chair, is it possible to just have a 5-minute?
We will take let's make it a 10-minute break. It is 10:27. We'll come back at 10:37. Okay. To resume agenda item number 9, discussion of possible direction from the board to staff potential program changes for plan year 2025.
Celestina Glover for the record. Today, what we're looking at, my report essentially does a very high level. Here's what we're considering initially, and then whatever else the board would like us to look at. So as we've already said several times, is excess reserves are at 0. So any plan design changes that results in an enhancement benefits, we have to look at the fact that this could ultimately increase rates depending on where we land when we're getting close to that point, which is just a couple of months away. So the two things we are looking at, we were looking at the possibility of expanding the pharmacy network and what would that do? What are the pluses and minuses there? And then plan alternatives to include the viability of the EPO 18 months. We know that the rate setting in those areas are increasing over time. And is there something else we can do? Do we leave it status quo? Are we willing for at least in the year coming up, premiums potentially go up? What do we do going forward? So I've asked Siegel, our consultants, to look at these options, give us some basic information that the board can consider as far as do we do a deeper dive into those particular things? Is there something else you would like to see? And with that, I board from Siegel.
Okay, thank you. First of all, congratulations to Executive Officer Glover. And I want to commend the board on approving a quality candidate. We look forward to working with Ms. Glover and staff going forward. Some materials that are in the board packets that begin on page 135 of the board packets in the PDF. And I don't think I said so. This is Richard Ward with Siegel for the record. We have a couple of items here just to provide for consideration and perhaps discussion to move forward and then come back at future meetings with specific proposals. On page 2 of our materials, which is page 137, just as a reminder, I heard there's some discussion earlier where there were a lot of plan changes that were approved and are considered and approved and are being implemented or have been implemented for the current plan year. Just a review of there are 8 categories of changes that were considered last year. There are about 12 distinct options or multiple options, for example, for increasing the dental annual benefit limits and a number of options for spending down reserves through PEBP for HRA credits. And there were 7 of these that were approved. So there's a lot of activity for the current plan year. We have a couple to walk through for consideration for plan year 25. All right. As Ms. Glover mentioned, there's a consideration to review open access for the pharmacy plan. So there are COVID-related changes that brought savings going back in 2020, where the networks were tightened, and tighter networks generally bring better discounts and lower costs. And that certainly has been the case, but now there's a consideration to review expanding those networks and then comparing the value of that additional access and weighing that against perhaps costs that may come with that additional access. So that would be for the retail networks as well as the Smart 90 network. Currently, members are required to use a more narrow pharmacy network than the broadest networks that are available to get the lowest cost the lowest copays available. And so we'd want to compare the access that would be available under the broader networks to the access that members have now. And we'll coordinate with Express Scripts on the details of how that might look. I'm fine with that. That's permissible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Michelle Kelly for the record. I'm just wondering regarding the pharmacy, obviously there's been a lot of news coverage on the Albertsons Kroger merger. And earlier this year, Kroger dropped Express Scripts. And I'm not sure if that still sticks, but it was a big deal. I think it was January 1st. So under the current network, are we going to run into issues if we don't expand it? Because I think Kroger's the lead acquirer of Albertsons if that merger is allowed to take place.
That is something that we would want to consider is in this review is what does access look like currently without those pharmacies? And then what additional access would be provided by the addition of the pharmacies that are currently not covered in that most narrow preferred network.
And just to follow up, so is it a situation where it's kind of all or very narrow, or are they kind of like bands, if you will? Does that question make sense?
I believe that there are primarily two options, but what we want to review is the impact of the differential between those two. As we've seen sometimes when you have a narrow network and then a broader network, the additional access for that broader network is not that substantial. It's not that meaningful. But the cost differential that has been negotiated with the pharmacies can be fairly substantial. So we want to help you understand the balance and weigh the additional access, whether it's substantial or fairly minimal, against the potential cost impact. And I will say that especially with pharmacies, setting aside the Kroger and Albertsons situation, that this may not lead to people changing their habits. If they're currently using a particular pharmacy and then they're provided access to another pharmacy that's across the street or nearby that is currently not in the preferred network, they're not necessarily going to change to that other pharmacy. They may, if they're currently driving to another town to access a network pharmacy and then a pharmacy that is much closer, they may change their behavior. So we may not see the change in I keep saying behavior, but we may not see the movement from pharmacy to pharmacy that you might expect with that kind of access.
This is Betsy Aiello, and I'm just wondering, what triggered us looking at this? Was it because COVID now is officially not a thing? So we're looking back at where we were, or are members calling us and saying we don't have access to get our meds, or why are we looking at this? Just out of
I would defer to staff, especially regarding member inquiries.
So this is Celestina Glover for the record. We often get asked, we haven't been asked specifically on pharmacy, but we often get asked about being able to use different medical providers or pharmacies or whatever. So we thought, okay, we have a very narrow network. It provides cost savings to the plan and the member. If we look at that to expand it, to give individuals who maybe live somewhere where there isn't a pharmacy, geographically, they're probably in the range. But if there's not a pharmacy close by they can use, does this benefit them? Are we helping them? So this is another one of those, let's look at what we've got going on in the plan. Is it what the members need? So it wasn't a specific request. It was just one of those things. Can we see, does this make a difference? And as Mr. Ward said, that there's a possibility that people won't change the pharmacies they're currently looking at, but we felt like it was worth at least considering and analyzing to determine Does it count?
Okay. Moving on to the next one, on page 139 of the PDF. Regarding specialty copay, the specialty copays, the copays required, or the cost sharing required for members that have specialty medications is pretty substantial. There's a table that shows that members are required to pay 20 or 30% after deductible in all cases of the medication. And a lot of these number of these medications are high cost. And an example is if there's a medication that costs $10,000, then in the low deductible health plan, even if they've already met the deductible, then their cost share is $3,000 of that $10,000. And that provides an incentive for members where there's a manufacturer coupon that's available through the Save on SP program to enroll in that program and then have a much lower cost share, have a much lower copay, and then the plan benefits from the value of that manufacturer coupon. And so that saves the plan money. And the member then has a lower cost share. But that's only for members that have a medication where there is a coupon available, which is not the case for all specialty medications. So there are a number of members that are in a situation where they have this 30 or 20% obligation, and they don't have that avenue to have it reduced by enrolling in the Save on SPRX program. And so the consideration here is to change the cost share for members that have specialty medications so that not all members are exposed to that higher cost share. And we've done a little bit of preliminary analysis, and we think, and I'll caveat this, say we want to come back with final numbers, but we think that this can be done without there being substantial cost impact to the plan, because a number of these members are already hitting their maximum out of pocket, their annual maximum out of pocket. And what this change would do for these members is provide, I'd say, more cash flow relief. So if they're going to hit the maximum out of pocket anyway, then with the plan design, if they're paying, let's say in this example, $3,000 in July or August, early in the plan year, they're going to hit their max out of pocket earlier in the plan year. Whereas if they don't have as high a cost share for their specialty medications and they hit the max out of pocket regardless, that's the same cost to the plan overall, but their costs, they hit it later in the year. So their cash flow, there's an impact on their cash flow. And that's something that we're coordinating, we're coordinating with Express Scripts and with UMR on to measure and review how those people are hitting the max out of pocket during the year.
April Karn for the record, just real quick question about that. Are you looking at utilization and what specialty drugs the members are filling at the pharmacy to see if they would even qualify for those coupons?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And something that I didn't mention is that with specialty medications, it is often not the case that people don't have a choice. So with non-specialty medications, if someone is on a brand medication, there could be a generic equivalent,
Right.
and you can incentivize their considering taking the generic equivalents through plan design. A lot of these people don't have that same option. They're prescribed the drug that they need to maintain their health, and it's a high cost medication, and they don't have, if there's not a coupon available, then they don't have another option. And so they're obligated with this cost share structure that the plan currently has. So one of the side effects of this, or one of the so this would be that there'd be some cost shifted between medical and drug, just because the max out-of-pocket covers both. And there'd be some shift from medical to pharmacy, just within the plan costs. But overall, we think the cost impact would be minimal. So I think the request is for the board to approve that further consideration and investigation and analysis between now and November. And then, once we've completed that, then you can be further consideration with more specific information. But that's the concept.
Janelle Woodward for the record. Just a quick question on, is the Savon SP different than what the drug companies are giving for specific drugs? Where, okay, for a year you can pay whatever the copay is, where they kind of changed how you have to go through Express Scripts now separate. You can't just go to the pharmacy. Yeah.
Savon SP is a conduit to help the members access the coupons that are available from specific drug manufacturers for specific medications. It's not all specialty. So it's a program that provides access to the coupons. It doesn't generate coupons on its own. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. While we're talking about pharmacy coupon programs, we've learned that UMR has a new program that works similarly, but for medications, select medications that are what we might call medical pharmacy. So it's drugs that are and treatments that are provided, say infusions within a clinical setting. So they're provided, they're administered by a provider or by a clinician in a medical setting, and the claims for these medications flow through the medical part of the program, not through the outpatient pharmacy program. The Express Scripts Savon SP program is applicable only to the drugs that flow through the Express Scripts outpatient part of the program. And there are available for medical pharmacy drugs. And UMR has a program that, in a similar way, will access those coupons for plan savings and member savings. And this is fairly new in the industry. And so at this point, our thought is that it's worth investigating to understand the member impact, plan savings, and by member impact, what would be the members' obligations to participate in the program, and what might the cost savings be for the members as well. Okay. There are only 4 items here, but this last one is could be fairly substantial. This is the EPO and the HMO. And this is to review the viability of the HMO and the EPO and consider alternatives. Currently, the HMO contract has had an annual maximum increase for annual renewals at 9.5%. And the loss ratio and the experience has consistently run to the point that that's been the renewal. And that maximum increase is going to change to 20% for the next renewal. And with the experience is running such that that's a reasonable expectation that the renewal would be at 20%. And the EPO and the HMO are currently blended together for rating and for premiums. And so not only would there be, with the current structure, would there be an impact on the HMO, but by default, there'd be an impact on the EPO as well, because that 20%, some of that 20% would be incorporated into the rates for the EPO. And then that would flow down to member costs. Members would have higher premiums. And just roughly a 20% increase in the HMO would translate to a 5 to 7% increase in rates for the overall group. It cascade down to about a 15 to 20% increase in member premiums. So, which could be, depending on the tier, $40 to $100. So it could be fairly substantial.
I guess just to follow up, obviously you've got the bullet point about the HMO, which is fully insured, if I'm correct.
Correct.
And I believe the HMO has always been cheaper than running the EPO, even though it's self-funded, right? So I guess what has the experience been like in the EPO? Are we in a similar situation there where it's kind of running at a loss ratio?
Differential is more moderate. One of the reasons that we're expecting this substantial step up with the HMO is that the rates have been suppressed for a period of years below the experience. The EPO has been running, the rates have tracked with experience, and even if there'd been a significant increase, that's already in the past. Whereas with the HMO, there's a catch-up component to it that's coming because the experience has been running higher than the maximum renewal increases have permitted. So it's not that costs are going to increase by, it's not that claims costs are going to increase by 20 or 25%. Is that there's this catch-up that is going to occur by increasing the cap from 9.5% to 20%.
Thank you.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, our costs in the HMO have been going up rapidly, but we've been capping it at only 9.5%. Is there a reason why the HMO costs would be going up so much more rapidly than the other programs? The EBO, you said, also is going up. We were just realizing it. Has everything been going up, but we've been realizing everything, and over here was artificially capped? So it's been a good deal for a while and now we're going to lose it? Or why is that much so high going up?
I would say it's been a good deal.
Just trying to be blunt, but.
Hey, call it what it is, right?
Stacy Weeks for the record. So I feel like some of these are bells and whistles, and I'm not saying, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding the process, and I'm new to this process, but when I think of adding things to a plan, I think about, do I have the money to spend? And what I hear you saying is doing some of these things may impact member premiums. And then also, like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, what's the budget impact? Are we adding things without understanding our budget right now? If that feels like we're in a hole or at that point, should we be looking at efficiencies? And maybe that's what you're talking about here, but it feels like it's shifting the cost to the employee a little bit. I'm just trying to understand.
Which one are you referring
The
to?
EPO, HMN. Are you trying to
Oh.
avoid shifting costs? And then
Yeah,
where?
I'm really saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but who's picking up the cost? Is the state? Are we going to the legislature? I'm trying to understand the budget impact of all of these. Like, some of these sound great, but I don't understand, like, how much is that going to cost us? Do you see where I'm going? Thank you.
And that's,
So this is Celestina Glover for the record. We're looking at what options we can consider for plan year 25, so July 1st. Do we need to make modifications? Do we need to make changes? Do we need to eliminate things? Can we add things? So part of that is looking at our plan design, the plans we offer. Do we need to reconsider the offerings? So it's not, today's purpose is not to say what it costs. That will come in November. Today's purpose is, here's some things to consider. And do you want us to do further analysis and bring that back? And then we would have more information regarding the cost. We typically don't want to bring a bunch of costs back if the board isn't interested in looking at those particular things.
Stacy Weeks for the record. I guess my question, I feel like, maybe I'm new again, but I would like to know what efficiencies we're trying to get so we can spend. I mean, I feel like it's kind of irresponsible in my opinion, to add things that we know are going to cost more money, that we don't have the money to spend, and then end up shifting more of that burden onto the employee. So I'm having, I guess for me, I would rather us look at what things can we do to control costs, and maybe that last option is that, before we look at, to know how much we have to spend, to know what is reasonable, before we go and have you look at all these things. I think that's, at least that's the process I'm used to coming from Medicaid, is that we wouldn't add something to our budget unless we knew we had the money. And if we needed to come up with money, we would first look at what do we need to reduce and what efficiencies do we need to find first? Does that make sense where I'm going?
Celestina Glover for the record. It does make sense. But what PEB needs and all our vendors, because we don't want to point them in directions that we have no intention of going. We need direction essentially from the board that says, okay, here's some suggestions that we can look at. So the potential of the effect of keeping this plan versus not. What is that really going to cost? Does it require shifting that cost to the member? Can the budget absorb some of those costs? Because if the cost goes up, it's a cost to the budget and it's a cost to the member. Can we absorb it? Can we not? But without knowing for sure which way the board would like to go, I don't want to send all these people down the rabbit hole of trying to do a full analysis of things that are outside of where the board is comfortable going. So because we bring this up does not mean you have to go with it. It's a suggestion. It's a couple of areas we're looking at. If there's something else, and we wrote the agenda item that way, if there's something else in particular you want us to look at, then we will incorporate that with anything else that we've been suggesting.
So this is Betsy. What I think you're asking is, do we want you to review whether we can still afford the EPO and the HMO? Maybe we can't afford it. Or do we want to offer it, but go out to members and say, you're going to see a significant jump because the costs went up that much? Or so I don't think it's adding something. I think the question is, do we want to evaluate whether we can even afford this coverage option? Is that correct?
Yes.
Celestina Glover for the record. That's correct.
Because that's that, and just as a statement, that option, I wasn't on it, so I don't know, but I think that option's been an option for 20 years, 30, I don't know, but for a significant amount of time, it has been part of the program, I believe.
The HMO has,
Yeah.
not the EPO.
Yeah. There was a change up there.
Okay. Jack Robb for the record. From prior discussions, discussion on here today with the HMO and the EPO, they're looked at together aggregate, but we had a cap of 9.5% on the HMO. So by having that cap, you still had to cover those costs. So people not having the benefit of the HMO, but were on the EPO, they were subsidizing the people on the HMO. Am I off?
I would say that the funding, I'd say to Richard Ward for the record with Siegel. I'd say it's slightly differently in that the funding for the EPO from both the state and the members is subsidizing the funding for the HMO.
Okay, so I'm not off.
But it's not solely on the members, it's the funding for the.
It's both.
Yeah, because you have one plan that is lower cost than the other. And then I need a third hand here, but but then it's rated at an average in the middle. So the higher cost plan is subsidizing the lower cost.
And what is the higher cost plan at the moment?
It's the EPO.
Right, so I'm sorry, I thought I heard Chair Robb say that the EPO participants were subsidizing the HMO.
Yeah, and I'm just saying it slightly differently in that it's not just the members, it's the state's contribution. It's the funding, which comes from more than just the members.
Right, yeah, sorry, but you're saying the EPO currently costs more than the HMO because of basically because of that 9.5% cap on.
Not solely.
but
That's one
largely.
of, that is a contributor, but it's not necessarily.
But
the only
so
reason.
up until present, I'm sorry, I just need to clarify this in my own head. So up until, through this plan year that we're currently in, the rates, the EPO has cost more per month all in. So, you know, our participants selecting it, whether it's employee and family, whoever, between their premium and the state's premium, it was a higher cost than the HMO. And now the HMO, their rates are going to increase by 20% because they haven't been able to realise the full cost in the previous years. And then the way the rate setting has happened is you basically take the cost of this plan and the cost of this plan and set the rate in the middle. So the HMO to me then has been in some way subsidising the EPO, right? Because we've been charging them more than the actual cost so that we could offer the EPO. No?
Opposite of that, the EPO has been subsidizing HMO's low rate.
Pepsi Strasburg, because what I think, Michelle, is we said that the rate was in the middle.
Right.
So therefore, some contributions coming from the top and some contribution is coming from the bottom. That's what you were.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
So I don't understand then how HMO participants are subsidising EPO participants.
They're not, it's EPO is subsidizing the HM because they're artificially low.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
This is Leslie, but, oh,
May I say something just, is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay. The opening comments here for this section are really to provide context and to I think hopefully lay the groundwork for understanding that it is worthwhile to investigate options to proactively address what we think is coming. And that can take the shape in a number of potential options.
and this is Leslie Biddleston for the record. I think to add some context, the subsidy from the state is already set. And it's set for next year because we do not have a legislative session before July 1st of 2025, state fiscal year. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is our plans are going up. Our subsidies staying the same.
No, it's actually going up.
Oh,
The subsidy is increasing
Oh, the
also. So
subsidy
that
is
was,
also
so that's
increasing.
a very nice feature of this
Okay.
most recent biennial budget
Okay.
is that the Aegis and the Reggie, the funding from the state is increasing from one year to the next.
Oh, okay.
So but that step up,
Is
but
not
it needs to be
covered.
relative, it is set.
Okay.
And so the increases in plan costs relative to that increase in funding is an important.
Stacey Weeks for the record, what is that trend for the biennium? Is it based like on the Medicare index? Like what is the trend in the budget based on? Do you know what it is?
I believe in the, oh gosh,
Trend in the budget.
just an increase in the
Is it
funding.
Increasing, what's it based on the trend?
It was, I don't think it was based on a benchmark of,
It was just meeting a need, okay.
right, but the analysis was based off of, I believe, a 3% trend that the budget folks thought was reasonable. Claims costs generally increase more than 3% from one year to the next in a group plan.
Pepsi Strasburg. So these suggestions, whether it's the pharmacy or the cost discussion, is this because of concerns from our members, or is this what we think are the best practices, or what generated these recommendations? Can somebody help me with that?
Celestina Glover for the record. So the EPO HMO, that was driven because we know that the potential for the increase is significant. And how will that affect the viability of the plans, the sustainability, can our members afford it? Can the plan afford it? So we definitely wanted to look at that, but I understand that in the past, there's been reluctance to eliminate the HMO. We had 2 HMOs and then we went to the self-funded EPO, and those rates are blended with the HMO. So that the members in the south on the HMO and the members in the north on the EPO are both paying the same premium for the same tier. So that was, this is something we're concerned about, that we feel like we need to investigate further. What action happens, obviously, is the call of the board. The pharmacy piece, because we hear from members that, you know, we want more benefits, we need to add this, we need to add the other. The pharmacy was the one thing we thought we might be able to do depending on the result of the analysis. Might not be an option that we can bring, and if the board chooses to say yes, do the analysis, then that's what we'll do. We'll work with our vendors and with the team to determine what that's going to look like, and we'll make that recommendation when we bring it back. We would say, yes, we looked at it, this is the result. Do we recommend it or not? And we may say, no, it looks like it's going to cost the members in the plan more than we can afford at this point. Doesn't mean we can't look at it again in the future year.
Can I ask a timing question? Michelle Kelly for the record. So obviously the pharmacy stuff is more of a pivot if the board chose to do that. Whereas the EPO HMO discussion is a far bigger discussion. And any change to me requires a much longer implementation. So can you perhaps just say for the record and for people listening, when we're talking about changes to the EPO HMO, whatever is decided, kind of what's the timeline on that?
So this is Celestina Glover for the record. We haven't set an exact timeline. We're not looking to necessarily, unless some critical information comes out, that on the 1st of July, the plan goes away, because that's what the analysis shows. It could be a year from now. So we really need to look and see, what is it now? What's it look like today, which we already know? Where is it headed? What is it going to look like on the 1st of July? Can we, within the resources we currently have, can we keep the plan, live within our means? Maybe, maybe not. So is this something we have to implement fairly quickly? Or can we make it another year, knowing that the following year, there's potential that it gets eliminated or drastically changed, so that it is viable? And at that point, it would be built into the budget. We would take it to the legislature. We would go through that whole process again with the approval.
So Janelle Woodward for the record. So we know that with a PPO or the CDHP, you're paying up front. EPO HMO, you're paying as you go. And more people take the EPO HMO because they have medical problems, or on the flip side, they don't have the money to pay up front. So you have that difference in how people are making their choices. But are there other programs that are like maybe somewhere in the middle of, lesser than an HMO EPO, but still gives that comfort to an employee that doesn't have the money to pay upfront?
That's something that we would look at during this analysis. One of the things that might be worth noting is that the value of the plan design between the EPO and the low deductible health plan the plan values are very close. They're within 2% of actuarial value. So the value to the member in aggregate is comparable between the two plans already. And so there's a difference in costs, but not much of a difference in plan value.
Tracy Weeks for the record, what is the actuarial value of the plans?
I believe it's about 80%.
I was just wondering, and this probably has occurred, but this is something I'm sure we kind of have been aware is been going a little bit on and on. And I'm guessing we've probably met with our vendor for suggestions on what can be done within the plan itself to cut some of this so that, or is that part of the analysis that's going to occur? So versus the idea of eliminating the plan altogether, changing within the plan?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. So I've had some informal conversations with some of our vendors regarding plan design. You know, what are the options? We haven't formalized any of that. That will come with the analysis. So if the board wishes to keep the HMO and EPO, which in the past there's been a reluctance to eliminate the plans of any type, any of our plans. Once they're here, they tend to stay. And so it might require reducing benefits if we're going to keep the cost to the member at a certain level. So if we don't want to exceed cost to the member by, say, 5%, then what benefits do we have to reduce? So that could be increasing copays, that could be, you know, pulling certain things out of the plan altogether. So it just depends on where we land and what is the pleasure of the board as far as what they would like us to try to continue to offer. And would members be willing to pay? There are members who would be willing to pay additional money to keep certain benefits. There are other members who would like to do that but can't afford it. And so we need to consider both. I'm not suggesting we eliminate the plans altogether, but I'm definitely suggesting that it's something we need to analyze and see really where are we going to land. Because at some point.
Yeah, no, I totally, I'm on board myself with doing an analysis of this because we probably have to know more to make some real decisions. But the other thing that's been hard for my brain is that over the years, I've been trained to think that HMOs were a cost-saving, cost measurement process, as opposed to a fee-for-service, people self-managing themselves type of entity. And what I'm hearing now is it's just almost the opposite. It's, or is it just because of that artificial 9.5 that all this is?
It is due in large part to the contract terms with the 9.5% cap.
And as Michelle Kelly for the record, so I think our HMO, EPO, I'm not sure the difference between the two, but I think there are some unique features where you don't need a gatekeeper to see a specialist, for example, and that comes at a cost. So that
that's what some of
medical
the costs
control
are.
you were talking about kind of isn't necessarily there in the current structure. So I don't know if that's part of the pricing, but I just, you know, every feature has a cost to it, right? So.
One last question.
Yes.
Betsy Strasburg, I read a lot of the comments here as well as people who approached me outside about restoration of benefits pre-pandemic level. Some of these recommendations will do that, or is that a separate exercise?
Celestina Glover for the record. It could be both. It depends on specifically what they're asking for. A lot of times, like we've heard long-term disability right now, it's a voluntary benefit. Years ago, it used to be a standard offering within the plan. But again, that comes at a cost. Can we absorb those costs? Can we sustain it? I don't know at this point. So yeah, so it depends on what additional things the board would like us to analyze besides the two items that we put into this report.
I think we had the discussion I was hoping to generate here. Let's see, let me just review my notes to see if there's anything that is worth commenting on further. In discussions with UMR, the networks between the HMO and the EPO are very comparable. they're not exactly the same, but they're from their view, between the HPN network for the HMO, a lot of overlap between the providers. So it would not be the expectation there'd be substantial disruption if the HMO no longer existed.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up on that one specifically, Michelle Kelly for the record. So right now, the HMO is offered in Southern Nevada. The EPO is a Northern Nevada product.
Correct.
And there's significant overlap.
The EPO utilizes the same network as the low deductible health plan, which is statewide. So it's just that the members in Southern Nevada are not able to enroll
Yeah.
in the EPO, but the same providers would be available generally if the HMO was replaced by the EPO, for example,
Thank you.
or if they enrolled in the low deductible health plan.
That helps.
Yeah. I'm like, how does that work?
Okay,
I'm sorry, Chair Rob. I just wondered if we could have a discussion about the data that the board might like to see for the November meeting on this.
that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna bring it back and read the agenda item again, so we know what we're talking about. We've had a lot of discussion, so we're on agenda item number 9, discussion and possible direction from the board to staff for potential program design changes for plan year 2025. Now that's the discussion we can have. I just want to make sure we're all back on the same page.
Keep us focused. Appreciate that. Michelle Kelly for the record. So I guess regarding the pharmacy, I guess is the first area I had a note on. I'm wondering, specifically the specialty pharmacy, what resonated in your discussion about that was spreading the financial load for our participants over a longer period, potentially a year, instead of kind of that first 2 or 3 months where they're forced to hit their number or until they do hit their number. So I wonder, but I'm also kind of curious about the specialty meds, the conditions they treat, and kind of the spend on them. And so I'm just wondering if it would be possible to get the top 8 to 10 special, I'm not sure how many thousands of specialty meds there are, but if we could kind of get the top number of them, what we spend on them, what they treat, just so that we can kind of, for me, it's about me understanding exactly what we're spending those huge co-payments on, what our members are spending their huge co-payments on. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Board Member Weeks.
Stacey Weeks for the record. I think, I know you have on here cost savings, but I would like to see sort of generally the impact to the rates if we do this, so we can have a sense of
Yes.
if it's, everything's great and sounds nice, but if it's going to cost us more money, I think we should focus on the efficiencies first so we can kind of stabilize where we're at. So that's just my thoughts. That's what I want to see first.
Last year at that meeting, each of the specific proposals had a specific estimated budget impact associated with it.
Thank you.
And that's certainly be part of the analysis this year.
Board Member Ayala.
Just a quick question. The specialty med, again, that's outside of the HMO. The HMO has the pharmacy within it, correct?
Correct.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Michelle Kelly for the record. So I'm just wondering, regarding the discussion for EPO HMO, I guess I would like to see a couple of things. It's a conversation I know we need to have because, I think the former executive officer was warming us up for it as well. So I'm wondering, can we get the fiscal year 22 and 23 and whatever year to date you can provide as far as trends and experience of the, I think, can we get that for the HMO since it's a fully insured product? We can. If we could get it for kind of the EPO, the HMO, and then our PPOs as well, I think, because I think it's relevant if we're talking about looking at all of the plans together. So the experience. And then one of the comments during public comment that kind of isn't in your packet, but I think it's probably part of the due diligence anyway, is, there was reference to the low deductible, having the deductible taken to zero. And I think it might have been a legislative action actually that did that with the enhancements. So I wonder if it wouldn't behoove us to actually look at the parity along amount, at the deductible level and the max out of pocket level to see if the plans actually do make sense and continue to kind of track where the board wanted them to sit, especially if the low deductible PPO and the HMO, if their rating is around the same, I think you said within 2%.
The EPO.
EPO and HMO, sorry. And then my last request, I'm sorry, and then I'll be quiet, is if we're looking at doing the EPO HMO potentially in 2 steps, I'm thinking, what can we do for fiscal year 25 to perhaps keep the plan in place? What are the options as far as changing deductibles? Or what would the premium end up being if we don't change deductibles, and maybe there's a happy medium, and then the longer term discussion about viability, and whether we need to merge, eliminate, or whatever. And I appreciate your patience, and now I'll let someone else have a turn.
Any other discussion or direction? Yes.
FC Strasburg, so if we are going to consider merging some programs, and you mentioned there would be a budget impact also stated for each of the alternatives, will it also take into account process efficiencies, whether it's with the people provider or service providers or within the state, et cetera, within that budget impact evaluation?
We would consider all impacts.
Okay.
For the record, this last page that you have, are these things that that they're going to do? Or are those suggestions where it says next steps?
I consider them suggestions because we would operate at the board's direction. Or we would operate at staff's direction and they operate at the board's direction.
I'd like to see them do all those things, which is a good overall look at the EPO and HMOs.
Board Member Weeks.
Thank you, Chair. I like the idea of having the short-term plan to get us through. I'd like to see what we want, eventually from the legislature, and then a backup, oh crap plan, right? Contingency plan for if the legislature doesn't approve. So we have a game plan, and maybe that takes longer time, but we all know reality of getting funding is hard, and really making sure we can make that case to the legislature when they see if they don't approve, what does that mean? So I think it will behoove us to look at that contingency plan, because then we can show lawmakers, this is what it means for consumer premiums. This is what it means for benefits. So I think we should have some of that discussion.
Any further discussion? Thank you very much for your time. Oh,
I think we need a motion. Oh, Leslie Biddleston, I move to accept the recommendations of Siegel for analysis and include the additional recommendations. And I don't know how to say all of those.
that were brought forward.
For Siegel.
Second, Michelle Kelly.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item number 10, presentation for possible action on the status and approval of the new PEB contract amendments and solicitations.
Michelle Whalen for the record. Before you is the contracts overview in 1. Nothing has changed there. Have no new contracts to mention. And we are working with Express Scripts on an amendment to incorporate rebate change agreements for various insulin products due to cost reductions made by federal guidelines. And we will be bringing that amendment to the board meeting on November. We don't currently have any contract solicitations, and our ongoing RFPs, our Center of Excellence, we are close to negotiating a contract and moving forward with that process. And the oncology management program, we have just received the proposals from 4 vendors, and we will be meeting with some evaluation team to select the vendor that we'd like to negotiate with.
All right.
So just one question. I don't, in the agenda packet, there's been reference to VIA benefits several times this meeting, but they're not on our contract list.
That's a $0 contract. We're going to get it added back on just for visibility. But that's why there's no cost associated with it currently.
Okay, thank you, but it'll make.
Yeah, we're going to get it added back on, but that came up after the pack went out, so that's, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, we'll close agenda item number 10 and move on to agenda item number 11, public comment.
Okay, thank you. Kent Irvin, ERBIN for the record, past president and director of government relations for the Nevada Faculty Alliance. Thank you, board members, for your service and consideration on behalf of state employees and retirees, and our hearty congratulations to Executive Officer Celestina Glover on your appointment. We look forward to working with you. Just a few things have been mentioned regarding the contract for VIA benefits. The current contract has never gone out for competitive bid. It was a sole source in 2010 after several name change to Extend Health. After several name changes, it was extended back in 2019 for 6 whole years. So that will be 14 years with no competitive bid ever. The legislative audit called out PEB for that, although I'll note that the state purchasing offices encouraged such extensions at the time. But it's time. It may be $0, but VIA benefits makes money on this through commissions. That means the costs are hidden, and the RFP really needs to ensure that the future provider is fully transparent, try to get to a per participant, per retiree fee with all other commissions somehow coming back to the program. Some folks on this board have done that in the retirement arena with what they call revenue sharing. I could call it something else. But if that's not going on in this industry, PEB should take the lead on that. Regarding the EPO HMO discussion, needs study, let's not make any rash changes. We got to this 3-tier, 3-plan structure. Yes, they probably need to be differentiated better. The single employee monthly premium for the HMO EPO is now actually $12 per month lower than it was in fiscal year 2018. So the costs per the employee have gone down based on some other changes in the subsidy structure. That means demand for it might be more elastic than we think. And any analysis from the actuaries need to include, okay, if the costs go up, and those will go to the employee because the subsidies or employer contributions are flat across tiers, how will that affect any shifts in enrollment? But ultimately, employees are paying for that higher plan upfront in order to have copays that are predictable for them. And that's a feature of that plan that has been valued by members, and there's a willingness to pay for it by members. It should just be a fair value for how they are charged. The state's contribution towards PEB came up. It is going up 4% between this fiscal year and fiscal year 25, but the fiscal year 25 legislative value is only 0.5% above fiscal year 2023. So it's actually pretty darn flat from biennium to biennium. However, the legislature did adopt the current benefits during its budget process, so we should be reticent to change those benefits yes, fine tune, do efficiencies. And finally, a word on reserves. The catastrophic reserve category used to be called the rate stabilization reserve. If experience exceeds expectations and projections, PEB should not be afraid to temporarily dip into the reserves to maintain benefits as approved by the legislature, and then ask the governor and legislature to make it up in the next budget. Otherwise, if you're always cutting benefits to keep that constant, it's not a reserve, it's a set aside. You know, if you can never use the reserve, what good is the reserve as far as smoothing out what happens in a volatile kind of plan? So I applaud the executive officer for thinking about how to revise the legislative budget process and the timeline to be more forward-looking. And let's work together to bring that to the legislature, perhaps starting with the Interim Retirement and Benefits Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment, Carson City? Seeing none, do we have public comment online?
Secretary Rob, I will bring the public slide up.
Thank you.
For those who have joined for public comment, your name or last four digits of your phone number will be announced and you will be advised you have been unmuted. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record and then proceed with your comments. As a reminder for those on the phone, please press *6 to unmute. Due to time considerations, each caller will be limited to 3 minutes.
Please proceed.
Rounders on in the lobby. It's currently 0 right now. Do you want me to hold it up for a minute? I'm sorry. Do you want me to hold it up for a minute? We don't have anyone in the lobby.
Okay.
You'll be at the Board of Regents meeting right now.
Mr. Auger doesn't have any comments. Anybody else has any comments? Seeing no comments, we'll move past agenda item number 11 on to agenda item number 12, and we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.